can I ask my panelists to come and sit on the stage, please? Okay, Lika. Are you... Sorry. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session on ocean observations for climate change, focusing on how we train the next generation of scientists and citizens. So I'm very pleased with the lineup of speakers that we have this afternoon, and it's really nice to have such a diverse panel. From the sessions I've been to so far, I thought early careers were fairly underrepresented, so I'm very pleased to have some early career professionals on this panel. We have, as you can see, 4 panelists in the room, but we also have a 5th who is online, and I'm hoping that the technology isn't going to fail us, but he unfortunately can't hear what's happening in the room, so there might be a bit of fumbling with having to chat to him through Zoom to make things work, but hopefully it will all go okay. So on this panel is going to be tackling various aspects of working with the next generation, both in terms of training the next generation of scientists, but also educating current and future generations of citizens about the importance of the ocean, of ocean observations, and of ocean and climate. And we have quite a diversity of perspectives on this panel with people who are coming from a capacity development background, but also communicators, artists, writers. So I'm really looking forward to hearing all of their perspectives. But the common thread in all of these, the presentations that we're going to hear is really that the people on this panel are working for the future, for future generations and the future of our planet ultimately. And speaking of the future, I just wanted to briefly show these pictures that are from children in my son's school and class. And recently they've been doing a topic on climate change, and I just want to highlight that I think our children are in good hands with their schools and their teachers, and the schools are really doing an excellent job in educating our children about the climate change issues. But I think we all here in this room have a role to play as well in furthering their education and their awareness, and perhaps bringing ocean science to the classroom more than it is already being done. So we have, as I said, a great lineup of speakers. The first presentation will be by Mumini Savadogo, who is Executive Director of the VASCAL program, and you'll hear a bit more what VASCAL is in a few minutes. Then we'll have Lilian Krug, who's the POGO Scientific Coordinator, followed by Alison Cusick, who's a PhD candidate at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Then we'll have our online speaker, Adam Griswood, who is a freelance science writer. And finally, Jimena Vega, who's also a PhD candidate, but at the University of Stirling in the UK. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining this session. So this is just a brief overview of the different topics that are going to be discussed. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. I'm sorry about the pronunciation, Mumini Savadogo. So he'll be talking to us about capacity development in ocean and climate observations in Africa and through the VASCAL program. So you have you can come here, yeah.
So thank you very much, moderator. Good afternoon to everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be here to talk just a bit about WASCA, and then I will also give you some information about our graduate school, which is specialized on climate change and marine science. So what about WASCA? WASCA is stands for West African Science Service Center on Climate Change and Adapted Land Use. This is an international organization with regional scope. We are serving West Africa with science services. What do you mean by science services? The first pillar of our action is about capacity building. What do we do in capacity building? Through partnership with the different countries and our other international partners, universities, research centers, in particular from Germany, we have been able to establish 17 training programs across West Africa. Among them, 10 PhD programs and 7 master's programs. Among the master's program, you have the climate change and marine science. All the 17 programs are related to climate change. So you have specialized schools for climate change economics, climate change and education, climate change and water resources, climate change and biodiversity, climate change and energy, green hydrogen, etc., all across. You know, climate change is a cross-cutting issue. So we have those specialized graduate schools. Each of the graduate school is serving as regional center because each school is hosting students coming from all West African countries. So you can imagine, it serves at the same time as a platform for them to interact, and the training is provided in English. But we train all of them to be able to at least speak English and French. So they are all bilingual. At the end of the training, they have good exposure to international and then to local also capacities to interact with everybody. So this is something that is unique in WASCA. Up to now, we have enrolled 543 students across the 15 ECOWAS countries. 285 already graduated. And we have a strong alumni network across the region. Organized regionally, at national level, we have executives, and they are really doing well on the ground, working for international organizations, for ministries, for NGOs. Some of them even went to private activities, and they are performing well in the region. It means that this is key one. So I'm starting with that one because this is really our topic of the day. Then our second pillar has to do with research. We do research and innovation through a competence center, which is located in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, but coordinating research across West Africa. And then we do also climate services. We provide because we believe that by building human resources capacity, having a good scientific platform, well-equipped platform with teaching and research facilities, and well-trained team, we derive research results and translate them into something that can be used directly on the field to advise policymakers, but also to advise farmers and advise other stakeholders. So these three are very key to WASCA, and that's what we are doing. So thank you for inviting us again. Let me zoom now into specifically what we are having as master research program on climate change and marine science. This is a specific one that was established some 4 years ago between WASCAL and partnership of the university, what you call UTF, the Technical University of Atlantic in Mindelo, Cape Verde. This has been established to provide knowledge, not only in transferring international knowledge to local level, but making sure that we have a cross-cutting feeding of knowledge and interdisciplinary research across the region. By doing so, this is the third batch we are having in Mindelo. We recruited the first one in 2019, completed the second batch, and then the third batch is running. The students have the opportunity then to benefit from international lecturers, but also regional ones. And more importantly, students have opportunity to do very good practicals. How they do that? For instance, I'm sure with regard to ocean activities and research, it is a privilege to be able to do what we call a floating university. WASCAL has a floating university. This means that students have opportunity to join Marian vessel, that is well-known vessel, and then board from Mindelo and do their research interdisciplinary throughout up to Germany. And this is something that is unique to them and gives them really practical knowledge and how they can observe, sample, do analysis because of the equipment we have there, and this is very unique. So we are really proud of them. Some of them have seen Pogo here. Some of them are even working at Pogo. I don't know, is there any alumni from WASCAL here in the room? We never know, but we have some working for Pogo, for example. So the alumni are very well trained, then they are doing well. My call for this afternoon is to just let you know that we need to develop the capacity of our young people, the young generation, on ocean activities and research, management. But to do that, we need to develop scientific capacity locally, on the ground. And that's what WASCAL is doing. And we'd like to open up and to tell you that we are open to further partnership. We thank our partners that are working with us, in particular GEOMA, that's the Elmwood Center, Research Center in Mindelo, Cape Verde, the University of Tunen, and other local partners from the Ministry of Education in Cape Verde. And we are really open to partner to further develop capacities in the region. This is really at the heart. You can't do without appropriate human resources, well-trained resources that can understand, that can also generate innovations, and that can translate them to the users and impact our generation. So young generations, they are looking at us. We used to look at international level to find some of the experts, but we need to develop also local capacities. Our young generation is waiting. This is my final call. I wish to thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for introducing the program, which is, the master's program is very young, but obviously already doing some wonderful things. And I think Pogo and Pascal should definitely talk more about working together. I also need to say that you need to leave a bit before the end of the session, so hopefully we'll get to the discussion and questions before you have to leave. So next up, so the discussion about training, the floating summer school and training on the ship was a good segue to Lillian's presentation on Pogo and the Pogo initiatives that take young scientists to sea, but also bring the ocean to the classroom.
Hello. Can you hear me well? Great, thank you. So, first I would like to explain for those that are not aware what POGO is. So, we are an international consortium of oceanographic institutions. Currently, we have 55 members in 29 countries. And it is part of our commitment. Our objective is to advance and promote global ocean observations. And it's part of our commitment to train the next generation of marine scientists and to strive for a more ocean literate society as well. Thank you. So recognizing that ocean observing expertise is unevenly distributed in the global ocean, our capacity development program provides grants and fellowships supporting early career ocean professionals, especially from developing countries, so they can enhance their skills and in ocean sciences. And since 2001, we have provided fellowships for over 1,000 young scientists that have received training in advanced oceanographic institutes or research training centers or onboard research vessels. And through the Ocean Training Partnership, we coordinate research vessel-based teaching and learning experiences, which either make use of spare berths on board planned cruises or run training cruises on transit ships. On this one-on-one training, young professionals receive training in sample collection, data analysis, and interpretation, while senior researchers receive help with their seagoing work, passing on their knowledge to the young. And in partnership with the Alfred Wegener Institute from Germany, we run dedicated training cruises on empty legs of the research vessel Polar Stern while she is in between ports. So this successful floating summer school, which concluded its 4th edition in September this year, hosts up to 25 trainees from all over the world for a 1-month transoceanic cruise, while they receive practical and theoretical lectures in ocean, atmosphere, climate interactions, and gather experience in outreach and science communication as well. So to cite a few examples, in the outreach component, the trainees exchange with school children from several countries during live calls, where they can answer the questions of the children about the ocean and the daily life on board the research cruise. They also team up with the schools on engaging activities, where the kids can learn more about ocean circulation, climate change, and even technology. As an example, in the 22 North-South Atlantic training cruise, which went from Bremerhaven in Germany to Cape Town in South Africa, we collaborated with schools from 4 countries, Ireland, Germany, South Africa, and Spain. And the kids from selected schools on these countries assembled and decorated mini boats, which are small vessels carrying GPS and temperature sensors. They decorated, baptized it, and sent these mini boats back to Germany to be on board the Polar Stern. And while it was on its transect, these mini boats were deployed by the trainees during the cruise, and the children are now using their tracks to learn more about the ocean. So we believe that training the next generation of ocean scientists is fundamental to monitor the impacts of a changing climate, and that captivate young minds is paramount for secure and prepare future decision makers into protect and restore ocean resources. So I think that that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Lika. I completely forgot I had biographies to introduce the speakers, but I'll put up the QR code at the end to the web page, which has all the speaker biographies on it. So next we have Alison Cusick from Scripps Institution of Oceanography, who's going to take us to Antarctica.
Hello, everyone. Is the volume okay there? So I am sensing a theme building that the in-field experience is incredibly important. My name is Allison Cusick, and I'm at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And before I went to Scripps, I was a research technician working in various labs. And I was sent to Antarctica for my first time in 2013. And I was blown away, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to dedicate my life to studying polar ecosystems. And I learned that there was a tourism community that visits Antarctica. Of course, everybody thinks of tourism when they want to go to Antarctica, or you go as a researcher or support contract to researchers. And this year, there's an estimated 100,000 travelers going to Antarctica. In any given summer, there are only about 5,000 scientists from all the nations that work down in Antarctica. So to me, I thought, what an amazing opportunity to engage this community of travelers that are going down there. And so the way I came to Scripps originally as a master's student in a one-year program for policy, economics, and social issues around marine science. And in that 1 year, worked with Dr. Maria Vernay and a student in Argentina, Martina, as well as the polar guiding community, and developed this citizen science program where we partner with the tour industry, with the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators, and try to get people involved during their vacation in polar science, because it's one of the most remote and harshest environments to operate in. There's an extreme limited amount of data that's available, especially on the coast, the ecosystems where the whales come to feed on krill, where the penguins are, the seals, where that brings the travelers down for the scenery in the first place. So citizen science, if you haven't heard of it, can come in many names. So it could be community science, crowdsourced science, public participation in science. And in this case, it's a way where you can do science, but people who are not professionally trained as scientists or the public can also participate in that endeavor with peer-reviewed scientific results and outcomes. And so in this program, the travelers hop in one of these boats. They leave the main ship as they're going to visit the penguins on shore, and we spend about an hour sampling water measurements and collecting water samples, where I can try to understand how melting glaciers are influencing the community of phytoplankton or algae that grow throughout the season, because this is the base of the food web and it's incredibly important to the entire ecosystem. So we also know that 97% of the glaciers on the peninsula are in retreat, so understanding how that input of fresh water into the marine ecosystem might influence this is incredibly important and something that travelers can get involved in. So far, over the 6 years of this program, if each boat can hold about 10 people, we've had 400 sampling events. So that's almost 4,000 travelers that have directly gotten their hands wet to help collect samples. And then all those samples come back to me and my colleague in Argentina, where we analyze everything and then try to ground truth what we're seeing in the water with NASA satellites. So it's a program now funded by NASA. And a lot of the travelers, we ask them and do evaluation surveys of the engagement, and 97% of the respondents of our surveys said that they feel like it enriched their experience down in Antarctica. It's basically like a floating classroom. It's an immersive experience for them. And one of the things that came out of the results was that they feel like they learned something about the ecosystem that they hadn't considered. And there are also testimonies of feeling this childlike spark of curiosity, was one comment from a participant, which I think is amazing, because this group of people can go on wherever they live in the world and influence their networks of people that they associate with. So because the project is in Antarctica, there's the first level of immersive environment engagement in the field, and then on board we give lectures on the ship, and those same lectures can be given off the ship, and we can also record them now and put them online. Especially with the last 2 years, we've really moved into that setup to continue sharing and bringing Antarctica to people around the world. And then also through social media, we can't get the contact information for the people who participate, so we try to be very active on social media, which includes Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, the website, Facebook. I don't do TikTok, so I should hire somebody who loves TikTok, or any other platform that is a place that people can come if they want to see what we are doing, and we can put the results there. And then with that social media platform, I also have a personal, professional one that can kind of cross-post things and get engagement that way. And then what I've found is it's not just about showing people the science. I've discovered that you really have to make a personal connection, and a lot of times I'm constantly taking videos or photos, and sometimes I think there's a perception that if you're doing selfies, maybe it's a little more on the side of vanity, and so some scientists I talk to just kind of shy away from that. But there was actually a group of scientists who looked at scientists who selfie and saw that it actually creates trust with the public because you're personalizing yourself. And I don't know if you know Neil deGrasse Tyson's tagline is "your personal astrophysicist." So to the point of people feeling like they can connect at a personal level with a scientist. And then a lot of the posts don't actually get engagement on the science itself, but on strange topics like how to make a polar-themed cocktail. So there are ways that can be engaging, which you might not realize draw people in to wanting to connect with your content, but then that's the door that opens to further science outreach. Of course, I don't have all the skills that it takes to be a science communicator in every avenue, so partnering with other people like artists and educators and filmmakers is a really cool way to continue expanding the scientific outreach. So during the pandemic, we connected with a filmmaker who made a little video about our project, and then also two artists in Chile who designed this phytoplankton identification guide. So when the passengers are on the ship, they can identify the phytoplankton they're collecting, and it's bilingual, Spanish and English, because my colleague is from South America and we want to expand the reach of people. And this year we also partnered with a group of educators with NASA to bring polar science to students in Puerto Rico. So trying to make that connection of why polar and Antarctica would be related to Puerto Rico, and kind of driving that point that the Southern Ocean and Antarctica are the heartbeat of our planet, the air conditioning system that keeps everything going. And then, of course, connecting with media, news journals, journalists to kind of share the story of what's happening with the travel down in Antarctica and connecting with polar science. And of course, there are so many ways you could be doing scientific outreach and science communication. And one of the ones that has surprised me the most was a recent opportunity I had to connect with, I don't know if any of you recognize this gentleman, Jeff Goldblum. He's maybe Jurassic Park or The Fly or Independence Day or Thor. So he's a Hollywood actor, and I was asked to be part of an episode talking about the oceans and phytoplankton with Jeff Goldblum, and there was no training for this. So I realized that all of the experiences through school and through workshops and through just trial and error in science communication kind of led me to feel comfortable enough to be able to be on this episode of The World According to Jeff Goldblum. So I just to encourage anybody, if you feel nervous that it's not perfect enough or you're not polished in your content, I don't think it necessarily matters if you're just putting things out there. You'll find a niche, you'll find your style, and you don't know, Jeff's network of people who now have probably watched him talk about phytoplankton is massive. So that's another way to keep that spark fire growing. So just to end on that is just really encouraging, find your own personal way you like to communicate, and then partner with other people so they can communicate in the way that they like communicating, and it will just continue growing. And then the frequency, I feel like oftentimes you can feel anxious that you're not putting enough material out there, but it's actually, if there's a consistency to it, whether it's once a week or once a month or once every 3 months, I think it's fine. It's just, continue to put content out, and it doesn't have to be at a rapid rate. And then, of course, it's crucial for science. I've had the National Science Foundation and NASA interested in knowing what our follower count is, and I think that's because of this idea of ocean literacy and trying to teach people and bring them into things that are happening with the ocean. So at the federal level, where we get our funding from, if it matters to them, then it's another way to get that science out there. So I just encourage anybody who's interested in that to start today with anything. And of course, all our colleagues publish research, and we're constantly reading research publications, so you could take nuggets and share the information that your colleagues are also doing as well. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for inviting me on this panel.
Thank you for sharing your experience, and also for ending with some advice on people who are perhaps nervous about communicating their science. Right, so now we're going to see if the Zoom technology is going to work. So we'll hopefully hear from Adam Gristwood. Okay, he's there. He's unmuted, isn't he? Okay. Shall I just type something quickly? And then
hi there. I'm currently in close to Frankfurt in Germany with a client. Normally I'm based in Manchester in the UK. I'm a freelance science writer, and I've had the honor of developing ocean observation case studies together with Pogo, which are available on their website. So this is a plug immediately, so go and please check them out. There'll be a lot more detail than I can fit into this short talk. It's been, for me as a science writer, a fantastic opportunity to meet and interview researchers from Pogo member organizations from all over the world, and hopefully engage and inspire people with ocean science. So I'm just going to very quickly, with these 5 minutes, reflect on some of the things I learned with the case studies series so far, and we can perhaps talk about how to get more involved in communication for scientists and things like that in the panel discussion, if that's what people would like to talk about. So could we go to the next slide, please? And the one after that. Great, thanks. So, first of all, the first learning point from writing like a heap of case studies on ocean research for Pogo, one of the take-home messages was that the ocean research is often about preparing for when unexpected events happen. So, just over a decade ago, an oil well operated by BP suffered a blowout, igniting an explosion on the Deepwater Horizon offshore drilling rig. Over 87 horrifying days, the well vomited around 500 million litres of oil into one of the ocean's most biodiverse regions. It was absolutely horrendous to watch at the time, I can remember, and I'm sure a lot of you do as well, who were there to see it. Major oil spills are thankfully they're relatively rare. I mean, you might say they're really common and horrendous, but they're not in the news all the time. But because of human thirst for oil, the odds that another one's going to happen someday are almost certain, and nature again will suffer the consequences. This catastrophe inspired a large collaboration of research institutes in Mexico and other organizations to try and prepare better should another oil disaster strike in the Gulf of Mexico. Their work covers areas as diverse as weather patterns, ocean currents, and ocean biology. It was a huge multi-year operation involving more than 300 researchers to make observations that can better show where the oil might be transported by ocean dynamics, what could be done to limit the worst effects of an oil spill, and how to protect wildlife. Next slide, please. So another thing that came to mind when I was writing these case studies was really like the scaling up, the great scale that the ocean research is carried on really a global level in many respects. And it's also really truly a global endeavor, so it's connecting researchers from all over the world as well. North and West China, like many other parts of the world, have experienced extraordinary heat and drought in 2022. Just 1 year earlier, these same areas were awash with record rainfalls. It killed hundreds of people, it displaced 100,000 at least. Meteorologists say that the effects of climate change on the Asian monsoon are making such devastating events in China and other countries in Asia more likely. And understanding the monsoon could help countries to adapt better to climate change. So one case study I was working on looked at the role of a fixed ocean buoy. So this is shown in the picture here, on providing data on ocean processes that might be affecting the monsoon as it manifests in countries thousands of kilometers away. They may look small, but these buoys are covered with sensors and instruments, and many of these instruments are also hidden beneath the water on fixed ropes. These extend up to 5 kilometers down to the sea floor, so it's really giving quite a lot of information from the surface, but also beneath the surface. And they can help shine light on everything from how the ocean is storing, moving, and releasing heat to the impacts that has on the air and the atmosphere. And I found this really fascinating, because when it's really interesting, like such a small instrument could be having, well, relatively small, it looks quite big actually in the picture, but it could be having such a big impact on the understanding of processes. So the next slide, please. Okay, so this, another case, well, all of the case studies, in fact, that I was working on really highlighted the importance of teamwork and working together. I thought I would, for this take-home message, I thought I'd actually highlight another example that we worked on in China, on Hainan Island. It's a very beautiful place, famous for misty mountains, tropical rainforests. It's got 1,500 kilometers of coastline, which is home to a quite wondrous diversity of marine life. But human impacts, such as pollution and habitat loss and climate change, are causing carnage for coastal ecosystems around Hainan and also many other areas around the world where there's lots of human development. But because these environmental threats, are multiple, when something bad happens in the environment, it can be really hard actually to pinpoint exactly what is going on. So long-term ocean observations can really help here. And in the picture on the left is a PhD student, Esther Thompson, who she recorded seagrass meadows disappearing literally 1 year to the next. This was personally very difficult for her to witness. But she could turn to long-term ocean observations that had been made by a Chinese and German team to better understand the conditions in which seagrass dies. And I think this was like really nice example of how the research is really valuable that could potentially help prevent such disasters or happening elsewhere or around Hainan, really understand maybe what the conditions are that are causing the loss of the habitat and inspire people to act. So the next slide, please. And then another key message I took home was the importance of acting quickly. So because of the pace of change of climate change and other impacts that humans are having on the ocean. So researchers that I interviewed in Japan study communities of tiny plants and animals at the base of the food chain, collectively known as plankton, and there's some examples of plankton on the right side there of the slide. Plankton are amazing organisms, very tiny, most of them you can't even see with the naked eye, and they produce around half of the oxygen in the atmosphere, and they help to drive large quantities of carbon to the deep ocean, where it could be held for millennia or more. So they're really, really important. But they're also highly sensitive to changes in temperature, and some of them are also very sensitive to changes in acidity of the water, both of which are increasing as a result of greenhouse gas emissions. The researchers in Japan wanted to understand how plankton do their thing in as natural state as possible, and because of the pace of change, it's really a race against time. So they've set up research stations either side of giant ocean currents which collide. I just put that picture there on the left just to give an impression of the ocean currents. So These create very different environments in the water, and some plankton prefer some areas and some prefer others. And they could really use these data to develop comparative studies and learn more about plankton and the conditions where some plankton thrive. And then they are ready to look at how climate change and ocean acidification might be impacting their ability to nourish the ocean food web or lock carbon away from the atmosphere. And next slide, please. So a final thing that struck me working on these case studies, well, there was lots of other things, but just for today, is the ways that members of the general public can be involved in the research. So 2 of the case studies that I worked on were in Nigeria and Portugal. And both of these featured stories about unlikely, or for me they were unlikely, collaborations between researchers and citizen scientists who are helping the researchers to understand changes in coastal ecosystems. This includes the introduction of invasive species such as worms, fish and crabs that people are more used to seeing in other parts of the world. So when an invasive species takes hold in an area, at first they can be really hard to spot. One big clue can be found in a fisher's catch. And ongoing collaborations with fisher folk are helping to spot early invasions of invasive species, such as this exotic fireworm, which was found in the Guadiana River estuary, which is shown on the right of the slide. It can leave a really nasty sting if you pick them up, and actually the researchers are concerned that they might displace or affect the habitats of native sea creatures. So these were just some brief thoughts. Overall, I think the case studies have been a great way to show very vividly the importance of ocean research, ocean observations, and the huge potential there is to do more.
Okay, I'll just move on to the next. Okay. Yeah, I think you'll just wait. Thank you. Okay, so finally we have Ximena, who will be talking about combining art and science to raise awareness of the importance and plight of the polar regions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Okay, so when we say climate change, glaciers are melting, sea level rise, there is something about the message, big but rather light enough to bounce inside our heads again and again. And it doesn't matter how hard we scientists, indigenous people, activists try, say, and scream. Earth is warming, glaciers are dying, the sea is coming. It just won't go through our gut, so our efforts turn into a never-ending whisper, a kind of meal pain universally shared. Yet the pain, the murmur, has not enough momentum to awaken the will of most humans on our planet Earth. Now, art is a language in a different frequency, talks the universal language of the soul. Art is not a mere decorative thing, as Timothy Morton says. Art is a disturbing force. It does something to you. In the same way, when we visit glaciers, the mountains, and the sea, they impact us deeply. They talk to us in so many ways. We just have to stop. We just have to listen, not just with our ears, but with our whole body. Now, you must be wondering, what about the subjectivity of art versus the objectivity of science? Now, everything human-made is a construct of our realities, culture, and experiences. Science is about facts, of course, and that is why we can travel to the moon and know the pace at which our glaciers and oceans are rising. But what are the nuances that we put on when we communicate these findings? We Westerners have been taught one-way communication with our environment, and that is why, to a large degree, we got caught up into this mess. So what if What would change if we use color as artists do to teach about minerals? What if we use beauty to teach about sediments and the damage that fossil fuels and other pollutants are causing in polar regions? What would happen if we introduce science, data, and the most pressing problems with poetry, music, painting? What if we began with a poem to talk about how glaciers are melting with stakeholders, policymakers, and in schools? What if we try to understand the dynamics of glaciers through their sound? What if we could write letters to glaciers? I wonder, what would you say to a glacier that is about to disappear? What would change in you, in all of us, if we discovered that they respond to the sound of our voice, to the heat of our body? Oh, I don't know what happened. Oh, okay, sorry. And well, for this, indigenous people are the most experienced. This is the knowledge we should be desperately looking for, such as the advice from the old people from the tribe Yoreme from Mexico. Now, for this, I would like you to read this with me out loud. So, how does your thought resemble the waves of the sea? How is your thought like the storm? How is it like lightning? How does it resemble stones? How is it like a mountain? How does it resemble the spring? How is it like rising steam? How does it resemble the horizon? So now, teachers, scientists, colleagues, let's feed the heart with art to trigger the mind. Let's feed the heart with art to trigger bold action. Thank you very much for the Ocean Pavilion and Pogo for having me. Thanks.
Thank you for that beautiful intervention. Okay, do you have time for a question? Yeah, okay. Okay, so yeah, I'd like to kick off the discussion with maybe some reflections on how you monitor and evaluate the impacts of training, and afterwards we can talk about the impacts of the outreach as well. But so you talked a bit about alumni and their career progressions. Can you tell us a bit more about how you might go about evaluating the impact of the training program?
Hello. Trust you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Of course, what we do is that we have a department dedicated to capacity building within WASCA, coordinating all the 17 programs we are having. Within that department, we have the alumni network component that is very well supervised by that department. Then we do have also regularly, what we do is that we submit our graduate schools into assessment process. This assessment includes not only the ongoing training, the curricula and others, but also include the alumni. What are they, how they are impacting societies where they are in terms of knowledge transfer when they are recruited as lecturers in the universities, in the research centers, what would be their impact? So this accreditation process helps regularly review and then connect the curricula to the needs we have on the ground. Because the starting point is need assessment with the end users. Once you do the need assessment, you are now good to go in framing very well your curricula to respond to the need. But then you assess it, we do it regularly on 3 to 4 years basis, where we can, this one, we have just started, we are going now into our 4th year, so it's going into a process of assessment through accreditation, international accreditation. And this assessment includes the alumni network. But definitely, we have also, through the alumni network, success stories we gather annually and make sure that, of course, our alumni as really responding to the needs of the people on the ground. For those who are working directly with communities and for those working at universities, they are really fitting into the process. That's how we monitor the impact of our trainees from WASCAL perspective up to now.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you. Lika, would you like to add something? You have to leave?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, and sorry to see you go.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so
so-
as POGO Capacity Development Program, we do have an assessment with all that received training up to until 5 years ago. So the last assessment was sent out a survey to every trainee who graduated up to 2015. And we had some interesting results. At first, they were mostly students, master's or PhD students when they were attending the training. And about 50% of them now are senior researchers or even directors and head of departments on their universities. And 75% of them return to their country and are delivering science now back home. In terms of impact that they feel as for the training, most of them have answered that the training enabled them to implement new techniques back home. So new equipment or software that were not available previously on their institute, but also enabled them to participate in new research projects. And as Vascal Pogo also have an alumni network. Our objective, it's called NF Pogo Alumni Network for the Ocean, or NANO. And the objective is to maximize the benefits received during the training. So ideally, it's to keep the trainees together in contact with each other and with lecturers much after the training that they received. We have Jimena here and myself as good examples. But the NANO network also provides support to trainees, to former scholars of POGO trainings to develop joint research projects and outreach initiatives. So one of our global research projects, it's called NanoDope. We establish a monitoring network in 35 stations in 18 countries, all of them in developing countries. These monitoring stations are organized and maintained by our alumni, and they go regularly once a month or once every 2 months to sample temperature, oxygen, pH, chlorophyll, and salinity. So we are creating a network of monitoring stations in coastal areas from developing countries through this initiative.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we can move on to sort of the impacts of the outreach and the communications and citizen science kind of engagement. Do you have any views on how you might monitor impact, or do you have any examples of where you've seen a change in behavior or a kind of emotional response to your engagement activities?
Yeah, it is a tricky thing to do, I think, in some circumstances. So for direct evaluation or understanding of how the interaction with the program goes for the travelers, we have NASA would like us to evaluate the program. So we partnered with some master's students and social scientists to create surveys. So on the ship, we can get them in the moment of what their experience was with it, and if they had certain things that we were hoping they would learn about NASA mission objectives or phytoplankton or climate change, and capture it in the moment. I think it's a gap, an opportunity to partner and collaborate with other social scientists or people who could help us kind of track those people down and then create a whole effort to understand if there was behavior change when they got back home. if what they learned while they were on their trip has inspired them to interact in any way with their communities. And then with the program, we're partnering with the students in Puerto Rico. We'll be able to evaluate that directly, but it's kind of, I think, difficult to know unless people directly tell us what their experiences were or how it impacted them. But it's definitely something worth understanding. So.
Doesn't make sense.
That's a wonderful question. Assessing the impact of outreach and communication work was notoriously difficult. I think of like the modern age and social media. You put tweets out, and sometimes it'll get like 2 likes, and sometimes they get like 5,000, and it's not really clear why. But it's also not clear what the impact of that or what actually the like means. So it's a hard one. I think that, like, anecdotally, it's much easier to see. Okay, like people will get in contact. You saw, for instance, the case study that I mentioned. It was actually the University of the Algarve in Portugal, and let's actually look at how their outreach and communication really connected in terms of ocean science. So when they found these invasive species, there's all sorts like blue crab, it's like very tasty. So they thought of like innovative ways of connecting with members of the public. So when the fisherfolk, for instance, found this fireworm, they would put out like most wanted posters and get people to get involved with the science. So they're getting involved. This is more sort of citizen science aspect, but lots of people were getting involved, getting in contact, actually getting involved in the research. So that was an outreach thing that actually got people involved in the research, and they were reaching out also to, I think, to local chefs who prepared a menu with this blue crab. And it doesn't sound very nice, but actually the blue crab is eating everything in the estuary area that it can get its claws on. So like these sort of things make the media and make the news and make people get involved in ocean research. So that you can really see a tangible outcome. With the stuff that I'm writing, I mean, people get in contact sometimes and suggest ideas for articles. But for me as a freelancer, I'm passing a lot of my content on to the organizations. So and also it depends on how they use it and what the purpose is. So yeah, that's a very good question, and also something that a lot of people in communications departments in universities and everywhere are thinking about, because they want to have the biggest impact. And then for sure it has a huge impact. And there are ways of measuring that, especially like through newspaper columns and things like that. But yeah, you can actually, with the citizen science, I think, for instance, that example, you can really see tangible outcomes, and also people getting involved in the science. So I quite like that story.
Sign language. I'd like to give the audience a chance to ask questions as well. We're sadly nearing the end of the hour already, so if anyone in the audience has any questions.
So I'm wondering, we've heard about how we can engage young scientists. We've heard about how we can engage citizens in learning about the science, but the actual ability of setting up citizen science programs, especially when we don't have marine science programs, strong marine science programs in the country. I come from Egypt, that is one of the biggest diving destinations in the world. It's fantastic. There's so much to see, and there are so many people that are constantly taking pictures, which could be amazing data. but there isn't always a modality or a training or a way of including people in how to become part of this conversation. And there's not always a visibility of what kind of training we can provide the local communities, especially since they live in these areas and can be very important in collecting data. For example, one of the biggest problems with collecting data, as I understand it, for scientists, is funding for collecting data, which only, like, how long can you stay in the Arctic or in Ras Muhammad if you're not from here? It's super expensive. But if you're indigenous, I know friends of mine that are born in Qusayr, which is from the south of the Red Sea in Egypt, and have communities that would be interested and could collect data, but the modality of how to train them and how to get funding to create these programs is completely lost on us, to be honest. So maybe some of you have had experience before you had like your actual studies of how we could probably improve that.
That's a very good question. We do have some successful experiences in our alumni network. So, for instance, in this global project of monitoring stations, one of our alumni from Argentina, she runs a monitoring station called El Veril, and she includes a citizen science program within. So she partnered with a recreational scuba dive center, and initially the divers were a little bit like, what's the point? They were going with her and sampling at 5 meters depth, just getting a bottle of water. And after some time, she was showing them the results of this sampling they were doing. They went all together to a scientific event in southern Argentina to talk about it. So it was not a substantial funding. We don't provide substantial funding, but with that, she was capable of include the community on it. Another example, also from Argentina, we recently launched a call for an outreach initiative. So they are going to Puerto Madryn in South Argentina to a fisheries community, and they will partner with this community so they can sense, or they're using foldscopes, which are paper microscopes, and with that they will learn how to identify specific plankton that can trigger HABs, harmful algal bloom, communicate to the center, and then the center will go and intensify sampling of the stations. So these are a few examples.
Thank you. So unfortunately we're out of time, but thank you so much again to all the panelists.